Well, welcome everyone. This is our first in a series we're calling Quarantine Conversations. And Corey, as I've explained to you, this is a sort of Rise tradition, summertime tradition. Once upon a time we called this Stories and Voices. Then we changed it creatively to Voices and Stories.
Okay.
For the past couple years, we've called it Conversations. It's been more interview style. And so this summer we thought, well, we need to call this Quarantine Conversations.
Okay.
So this is an opportunity for us to hear the stories of amazing people connected with the larger Rise network. I've often said in some traditions, this would be called testimony.
Okay.
Every summer, I am amazed at the power of the stories that are told. So, friends, this is my dear friend, Corey, and he's going to share some of his journey of life and faith. So let's get started.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood. And, where were you born, raised, a little bit about your family.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in Harrisonburg, Virginia,
Okay.
where Rise is planted.
How was growing up here in the Harrisonburg, Rockingham County area? Can you share some formative memories, perhaps some of your best, most meaningful memories, and perhaps some painful memories?
Sure. So when I look back on my childhood, first, or anyone's childhood or story, I think the first thing I think about is how we tell stories, first off. And that's the issue of the single narrative or the single story versus all the gray area and all the complexity behind it in life. So if I were to look at what's my single story from growing up, that would be I was born in Harrisonburg, born a male, born white, born privileged, and if we look at, especially paying mind to some things that are more relevant in the conversation these days, that would be my first narrative, how someone might first describe me. But I was also born gay, so I was born queer, and I was born a bit different than the rest of my community in how I expressed love and expressed my emotions with the people I cared about. So when I think about my childhood, I think a lot about the wonderful memories where I got to relax with family and enjoy and play, and the ideal childhood that one thinks of. But I also think of memories of being bullied or over the issue of being queer, or facing the mental negative side effects of being queer in a community that wasn't ready to have queer people in it, that wasn't accepting and open for a queer person.
Right.
So looking back today, I can see that my childhood was great in every moment as I lived it and knew it, but there was also a fundamental kind of block keeping me from achieving a voice, from achieving myself and feeling comfortable in that community that I was born in. At one point, I ventured out to go to university in Richmond, and it was just too early for me to leave, actually.
And what age was that?
That was about 18.
Okay.
Yeah, so undergrad, freshman year. And that only lasted a few months before I was still battling with being able to find my voice and understand what it's like to be a part of the people around you and accepted in a community. So I came back and I got involved in the rescue squad here in Harrisonburg, and I would say that was probably one of the first things that was able to catch on to a passion of mine so strongly that it made up for not being able to kind of express my voice in Harrisonburg. It was the first thing I had discovered as a young adult that I thought...
It gave you life.
It gives me life, exactly.
Right.
It gives you purpose. It's your passion, and you can really find fulfillment in it. So I did that for a number of years here in Harrisonburg as a young adult while I went through school.
JMU?
JMU, exactly. I graduated in 2015 from JMU. And the summer before my senior year, I left and I went to Accra, Ghana.
Okay.
And I chose Ghana because I had an aunt who had lived between Ghana and Kenya for 30 years or so, for a number of decades, and she was a Catholic nun. So somewhere from being young, early on, I always knew that we had someone who was very respectable in the church.
Okay.
She was part of our family, and that was the work she was doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think at a point when I was getting involved in the volunteer work with the rescue squad and that type of fulfillment out of what you're doing, I wanted to go farther. Something inside told me, go, get out of here, leave, and if you can do it, go to something that is so completely different than what you know, because I had 22 years of growing up in this community in Harrisonburg. This is the knowledge I had been able to absorb. And so I kind of decided, go really radical, go somewhere on the other side of the world and see what you can learn. Go and be mindful and see what you can learn.
So you initially went for a summer.
So I initially went for a summer,
okay.
Correct. And I came back and finished my senior year. And after my senior year, or about halfway through my senior year, I decided to recruit a number of friends who could come and join me on my trip back. And I wanted to do a project, and we were going to incorporate ambulance work and training and devoting of skills and things to the village I had been living in. And so I recruited them. We all had a great trip kind of post-senior year. Let's go over to Ghana. We had a group of 9 people, I think, go over
all from
for the summer, all from Harrisonburg, all rescue squad people, all JMU students, people who just wanted to keep giving and keep learning and keep seeing. And they stayed for their 6 weeks, and I stayed for 4 years. And I didn't, I stayed much longer. Yeah, I kept myself very open to what am I doing next. And I found some sort of energy and some sort of education and learning there in that work abroad that kept me there. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to put a pin in that
Sure.
because I want to come back to those very formative years. Talk to us a little bit about your understanding of God growing up. Your faith formation. Who was God to you as a child, and then perhaps as a teenager? How would you have related to God, understood God as a child and teenager?
As a child, I was first baptized into the Catholic Church, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found most spiritually connecting was the rituals. I enjoyed being in Blessed Sacrament downtown, which has a beautiful architecture to its space. Mm-hmm. And I think that's designed and planned, but mm-hmm. It's something that as a young kid really was powerful. And so I can't remember what was being said in the father's sermons, but I remember the space. I remember the smell of the incense and the sound of the choir and those very tangible things that you kind of pick up on while you're a kid, and you're always distracting yourself the rest of the time through service anyways, so you don't remember the rest. But that was early on, that was church for me. Because of growing up queer and also fighting the ability to be able to acknowledge that for myself, there was a point where I just didn't feel comfortable with church, where I just didn't feel comfortable with God, where I felt very rebellious and thought, this is an impossible predicament you've put me into. Why? I don't understand. At a point, when all of the frustration of not being able to be authentic, and not being able to have my voice and be okay with myself came to a tipping point, I experienced issues with mental health, and I experienced issues with depression. And
was this in
was
high
it
school,
tough?
or?
This was in college. So in the beginning of college. Around that time, I moved to Richmond to start, and had come back. And so through that time, which was a period of 1 year or 2 years, to be able to go through a depression and heal from that as well, I found God through music again. So we're filming here at my parents' house. It's a beautiful place, and
It is.
we had a lot of nature to kind of run. It's on a golf course, so we can run on trails. And I remember vividly running on the trails at night, listening to music that was religious oriented, that I had just found, and that I felt was really connecting with. There was a playlist, and there was a genre, and there were things that they would hit my mind, and I'd be running, and perhaps at a time I'd stop and I'd lay down on the ground and I'd think. So the other important thing about identifying God in those moments was I was surrounded by nature. I was surrounded by his creation, and that was very powerful, and music was very powerful to me.
Okay. So on the surface, I think what led you to Ghana was a desire to make a difference
Correct.
in the lives of others.
Of someone,
Right.
And to have that purpose of it.
Right. Were there any, do you think, layers of leading underneath that, perhaps more subconscious needs pulling you?
Of course. I think that the idea to go was so complex in what motivated it that I kind of leave it up to the higher power as being in control of that move. I almost don't take credit for that move, because so many things were motivating it that I didn't know at the time, that I only figured out later. And that was from growing up, the physical boundaries of growing up in a space, and the memories of a town that never let you speak the way you felt was naturally your way to speak. And so that told me to leave, to find something else. My desire to keep working and keep giving and use the medical skills that I had learned, hopefully to help someone else who I had been told didn't have them, motivated it. When I went the first summer, and I had been challenged by discomfort for the first time. I went, and I remember the first letter I wrote home when I went for a summer to Ghana. I said, I miss my bed, I miss my comforter, I miss the air conditioning. I miss those physical aspects of comfort in our lives. So and that was really tough at first, But being uncomfortable teaches you things, and teaches you a lot. And so I learned that pretty quickly, I think, within the first step, and I said, you know what, I'm going to choose a phase of discomfort right now. I'm going to choose to throw the comforts that I have always appreciated to the side, so that I can learn the lessons behind not always being able to turn your head away when you don't want to see something, or to just turn your mind off. And that became one of the core ideologies in my head when I was living in Ghana, that if you're uncomfortable now, you're going to learn. It's for a purpose. You're going to learn something. Pay attention to that. Seek that discomfort and keep going there. Learn how to take care of yourself too, but you don't have to be comfortable all the time.
I know this is a complex and long story, so
Sure, of course.
Could you somewhat briefly tell us about that 4-year journey in Ghana?
Sure. I went without a job as well, which, looking back, is nearly crazy, you'd say. pretty mad. But I guess I felt confident enough in myself, or knew that I just needed to leave here enough that it would work out. And luckily, within a month, I had an offer for a job that ended up being that opportunity to teach me everything I wanted to know, when I couldn't know it, when I couldn't define it at the time. It was an opportunity to grow, to be creative, to collaborate with people from around the world, to work to change a community through a business model. To give you a quick snapshot of the work, we wanted to give some restoration back to Ghana, and some power as far as what it got to choose to build for itself, how it got to design its cities, its homes, its apartments, how it could live in a place that was in tune with its history and its way of life. There's a sort of continual colonialization going on in the private sector and that kind of thing. So we wanted to make it a community-based solution, a Ghana-based solution that could empower workers, from the day laborers to the craftsmen to the project managers to the architects, and allow them to really use their voice and not be swayed by, the normal that you must adapt to. So that was the journey, the work. It was tough. It was rewarding. I had never thought I'd start a business. So that was mind-blowing.
And you didn't have a business background at that point.
No, I didn't. At that point I didn't. But I was meticulous. And like naturally, I think from being in emergency medicine, you can't mess up. So you have to be a little meticulous with your work. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit forward thinking as well because of the emergency medicine. You want to think out any emergency you might show up to,
right,
so that you're not freaking out when it comes the time to do your work.
Right.
And it just seemed that and being very open to be trained in this field and in running a business, we had good people guiding us and mentoring us as well. So to learn from that in that opportunity is what brought me the joy from business or that type of a realm of work. So after 3 years, I decided it's been a lot of time over here in Ghana, a lot of time away from the family. It's time to go back, you know.
So what was hard about that time? What was most challenging?
What was most challenging was that there was a division that came up between my community here from my hometown and my community that I was building in my new home there. Because it was a different system. It was a different culture. There are different values. There's a different way of speaking. So I found it really difficult to relate what I was experiencing to anyone here. And that sowed a pretty big divide between friends and family, and there were people here who really felt hurt from being kind of left out of what I was doing with my life because I didn't know how to explain it. You know, it was such a different surrounding, and I was just busy with taking it in. You know, there was nothing negative about what I was learning from that difference and what I was seeing. It was just that I couldn't call home and explain it because no words could explain it to someone who hasn't seen it, you know? But I learned, like I said, one of the big things I learned through dealing with the tough times, through dealing with, I went through experience of robberies over there. I went through experiences of where you don't have any money, where you're running a company and you're paying everyone else's mouths before yours. And so there might be a big check coming in the bank, but that doesn't mean you have much money to even go eat lunch tomorrow in your role. So there was a lot of growth there. There was a lot of learning to get through these kind of things. And in a way, at some point when it got very stressful, I would go and engage with nature. I would get out the same way that I did here when I was young, and I couldn't figure out how to feel okay and feel normal and feel in touch with God. And so I would engage with nature there, and it was a beautiful tropical climate to get to experience God more wholesomely in, you know?
So talk to us a little bit about your spiritual growth while there.
Sure.
What lessons did you learn spiritually?
Well, because I had grown up kind of ostracized from some of the church's teachings, I always saw myself as there believing in God, believing in a higher power, but not always aligning myself with the church. And I'm not specifying any church, but the church, the greater church, you know. So something that hit me when I first went over there, which opened my eyes to a whole new idea of thinking and looking into the history books here, was I visited a slave castle, because Ghana was a place where, when the slave trade happened, from the beginning, late 1400s, from the Portuguese to the British to the Dutch to the Germans, people owned that land, and people were taken from there to build our country, to run our systems, and to get us where we are today. And so when I went to, now what I call the slave castle, was the fort, which was the British fort on the ocean, where they would collect slaves from inland, and they would keep them in the castle, and then they would send them out the door of no return to America. And so automatically that's going to be some insight. That's a real physical involvement with what was going on there. And the takeaway from that first tour was, as you begin the tour, you're looking at two doors. Okay, there's a door on the right, and up the stairs there's a door on the left. And the door to the right, the path kind of angles down. So you get to it and you start walking down into a cellar, and you enter the dungeons where people would be held for 1 to 3 months at a time in dark rooms with hundreds of people. I mean, terrible, deplorable circumstances. And when you look to the left, the stairs led to the door of the church that was built on top of the dungeons. So when I went on that trip, on that journey to that slave castle, it was another reminder for me of how blatantly hypocritical we can be sometimes in following our faith, in following what we think is right. And so I went back to that slave castle, I think 8 or 9 times in my time there, because I just felt so strongly, I felt so connected to it. And whenever I would lose track of what I was doing, that's a heck of a reminder. Go to this castle and visit it and look at the church on top of the slaves and really think, put your mind to that.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, that was early on, when I first got it, and that helped me really question not only the church, but a lot of the ways of life I had been living here in the States, the things I was doing, and the laws we had, and the way we talked about people, and a lot of things. And so, more beautifully, to round it out and to show you that I still maintained a connection with our Creator through that. And I feel that in me. That's something that I believe we all have to just have for ourselves, that relationship with our Creator. And there was one day in particular towards the end of the journey where I hiked up a waterfall with a number of friends, 3 or 4 friends who were close to me. And it's about a 3-hour very steep hike on the equator, so it's hot and you sweat and you feel pretty miserable when you do this hike. But at the top there's a really beautiful waterfall that overlooks an entire valley, that has a pool you can swim in. And we decided to camp out for about 24 hours when we got to the top, and we would cook food on a bonfire. And we realized just before, we didn't intend to plan this hike for the same reason, but we realized as we were getting up there that the next day was Easter morning. So it was a Saturday evening we were walking up, and it was Easter Sunday the next day. And I engaged in a period of reflection kind of through that hike, engaging with Mother Nature again, the way I had learned to be in touch with our Creator since I was young. And the water is really cold in this waterfall, which is lovely because you're hot and
right.
You feel you're ready to jump in an ice bath sometimes. And the next morning when I woke up, everything was really quiet, and I decided that I would just go stand by the water's edge and allow myself to be in touch with our Creator the way I had been before, but not speaking words, but opening my mind to it. And something said, okay, go ahead, step in the water, walk in. And I started walking in, and it was freezing cold, and I was very in tune with, I think, what was going on around me as far as the views, the sights, the smells, the feelings.
Vibrantly alive.
Vibrantly alive. And then I told myself, you know what, I think this is your new baptism. And like I said, the water was freezing cold. So I told myself, dear Creator, you have given me the strength to fight this cold. That's my reminder that I'm not going to freeze in this river. You're going to help me get out of this cold pond. But right now, I'm challenging myself with something uncomfortable and telling myself that that's you. That's you telling me something. And that was powerful for me, of course.
Yeah.
And my friends woke up maybe an hour later or so, and we just went about the day enjoying that space, and we resumed back to life for the Monday, the next day to work. But
Right.
that was something that was so powerful
Particularly on
to
Easter.
have that on Easter morning.
So, returning
Okay.
to the U.S., again, I know there's a definite readjustment period.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can you say a little bit about that?
To put it really simply, is for 6 months I felt uncomfortable going into a grocery store, and that might be really confusing and hard to explain. But
I've heard many people who live.
Yeah, I was going to say, you hear
yeah.
that from people who return, and the fundamental aspect of it is we have everything available at our fingertips here, and when you come from a place where that's not the case, that actually creates anxiety. That makes you overwhelmed, and to know that you've been living a life where someone else has been living so comfortably, and you've been really fighting and kind of fighting your best to even survive, that's not a nice feeling. It's not a reward to say, oh, I can finally go to that grocery store, because you know what? You can go in the grocery store, but you can't really have everything you want in that grocery store yet. So there was an aspect of anxiety coming back and feeling out of touch. And I had learned so many things in Ghana, like what I learned at the slave castle, what I learned about people of color, what I learned about oppression, and oppression, not just queer oppression that I had experienced here, but oppression in our world. I had the chance to talk to experts and to study that and to have that in the everyday conversation. And so there were so many things I learned about the way we should be treating people and our society should be treating people, that when I came back, it was really painful to see not only what's going on in the news right now, but what's been going on in this country for a while. So there was some movement, there was something pushing me saying, you really just don't identify with that United States anymore, But the United States is my home. The Harrisonburg is my home. And if we go out in the world and we learn something, we owe it to our home to come back and teach those lessons, to offer what we have learned to fix our home communities. And there's that's something that's practiced in Ghana. They call it a diaspora. So the diaspora are people who have left at some point in history for some reason, whether it was their choice or not. But they live somewhere else in the world, and they are African Americans, Afro-Europeans, Afro-Brazilians, wherever they may be. And there's a big movement to say, look guys, you've gone into the Western world and you've received higher education and you've learned so much. Come, let's move home and strengthen our home with what we've learned. Well, kind of radically, that concept also works here in the States, because we can leave. We think we're the best sometimes, but we can leave this structure, this system, go take a look at a different one, and come back with a heck of a lot of lessons to share.
Amen. If you were giving a bit of feedback to the American church, what feedback might you offer at this point in your life?
I'll be honest, I read the Bible a lot as a child, but not a lot as an adult, because there's a lot of other books we should be reading too, I think. But I found one that when I'm thinking about that church on top of the dungeon, the slave dungeon, and when I think about the churches that told me being gay was wrong and was immoral and was ungodly, when I know today that's how God told me to love. That's what God gave me. That God gave me that emotion and those feelings and that expression, and I'm created in His image the way we all are. So when I think about the church in that aspect, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to.
Whoa! Woe to you is right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in so many ways, I just think, is it really Jesus' work you are doing? Is it Jesus' words you are living? Or are there other motivations here in the church that we need to really be aware of?
Beautifully and powerfully said.
Yeah.
All right, couple of other questions, because I'm aware I could talk to you forever. If you had an autobiography, which I fully expect you to write one, at this point in time, what would you name that autobiography?
And this is kind of a question I ask myself all the time as I'm thinking. And growing up queer and coming out to that, to accept that identity, the question is, am I queer in a normal world? Or are we all normal in a very queer world? And every day as I think about that more, I think it's the latter. I think it's the second one of those. We live in a very strange world and a complex world. And we're all probably all a lot more normal than we put ourselves out to be, than we put each other out to be. And that's okay. We are okay. We just need to be who we are. And we need to practice some philosophies that I'll get to in a bit. But one of them is Ubuntu, which you talk about with Nelson Mandela all the time.
Yep.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Can you tell us just a little about some of what you're working on, what you're learning, and a couple of your dreams?
Sure. So what I'm working on right now, first and foremost, is social impact business models. And that is the idea of taking business and the idea of profiteering and using it to provide a social change, or a fix for something within the community, and not only to make a profit. What can we work on to support justice? What can we work on to talk about real equality in our communities and in our neighborhoods? How does art move people? There's a lot of power behind art in being able to convey messages and to move people, and there are a lot of messages that need to be conveyed right now. But when you ask about my dreams, it ties in with my work, of course. We should be working to achieve our dreams. And my dream, when it comes to the life that I want to bring a family into, what I want to live in the future, I dream for a world where all of my brothers and sisters, from America to Ghana to anywhere else in this world, whatever sexual orientation, whatever color of the skin, whatever, all of their voices deserve to be heard the same way that our culture currently prefers to listen to mine, to a white man's voice and opinion. That I still feel guilty about that, and that's okay. That's called awareness. That's aware of what we are doing and our position in our system right now. But I dream of a world where that's no longer the case, where America does not have the self-centered, status of the top of the ladder that it has of itself, because it's just not true. And we need to listen a lot more to those we're sharing the world with.
You're so wise for where you are in your life's journey.
Thank you.
If you could speak to 13-year-old Corey, what would you say to him?
Well, I'd begin with I love you. Because growing up, and especially at 13, I didn't know how to love myself. Because no one in the school thought it was cool that I was a little queer. And you develop your own feelings and your own confidence in that age from the people who are around you. So I would tell myself first that I love you. I'd tell myself that you don't need to live in fear, because the way you love is not wrong in the end of the day. I tell myself that you are always courageous and committed, and if you pay mind to your intentions and how you go about yourself in your life, you will do a lot of good for yourself, and you'll do a lot of good for those around you. So just keep going. Don't give up. Don't let the depression overtake you. Don't let the mental illness ruin your dreams. Don't think that what you feel is not true and real.
Mercy. And then finally, if there is anything you could ask God or say to God, to your Creator, what would you ask or say?
Well, I have a conversation with him every day already, but there's not a lot of asking, and there's not a lot of telling. It's a period of reflecting for me. And it's a period of sensing a calmness where I remind myself that he created us. He gave us a messy world. He put us into a messy world, but he gave us everything we need to solve it in this world, So there's reflection on that. And I know that whatever I ask God, there are the moments where you're frustrated and you say, why and why now?
Yeah.
But he's not going to put a voice in your head and tell you right now. That's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen that way. But I believe the way that he is our creator, the way that he has created that surrounds us, the nature, the landscapes, the whatever we face that is bigger than us, if we pay attention to that and we stay in tune to that, he speaks to us through that. I think that's where we find him. That's where we can see him. And that's where he'll give us our answers. But sometimes it's answers you don't like. Right now, I think he gave us an answer of a virus a few months ago. And it's something we didn't like at first, but if I'm following the idea that he's our creator and he created this natural world which is around us, then I have to accept that he has some responsibility in what we've gone through these past few months, what we as a society have been through. And I think since this all began that it's a bit of a slap in the face for us, a lesson where it hurts, but it tells you a lot. And with time, you learn a lot. So God's speaking to us now. We just need to pay attention.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
You are one of my favorite humans.
Thank you.
And this is perhaps the most stunningly beautiful interview I've ever done.
Yes, I hope it shows up just as well on that end
I
for
know.
you guys at home. But we've really enjoyed it here for sure.
Yes.
It's a beautiful spot to be.
It is, and I'm sure there's probably more you'd like to ask Corey, and he is marvelous about sharing one-on-one with people, bits of your... He will also help you if you have any problems with your plants.
I do love the plants.
Right before the interview, I was asking him why his ivy is so beautiful and mine is always dead. So, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, and we will see you next week for another quarantine conversation. You are a gift.
Amen.
Daddy. So you insist on doing what you want to do. Ṣé ọ̀rọ̀ tinú ẹ ló máa ṣe lọ láṣìwà?
Daddy Monlo.
Musu.
Daddy, I'm going to the city.
You children of nowadays, you are too much in a hurry. Be patient. Be patient.
Daddy, I've heard what you have to say.
But I have to do what is in my heart.
Daddy Monlo.
Ora, let me tell you. Daddy,
Sir.
you are on your own.
Woke up one Sunday morning, told my daddy I'm leaving home. I'm going off to the city tomorrow, even though I don't know where to go. And daddy says, son, don't be a fool, 'cause life in the city is unbelievable. You could get broken, oh, you're just a little boy, and you may never find your way. And I said, I know I could get lost, I know I could get broken, forgive me, Father, but I gotta take a chance. Oh, I'm already gone, so just pray for me, for me. Pray I find my way. Oh, forgive me, Father, but I gotta take a chance. Oh, I'm already gone, so just pray for me. Pray I find my way. Oh, forgive me, Father, but I gotta take a chance. Oh, I'm already gone, so just pray for me. Hello, Daddy, how you doing? Hope Mama's doing okay. Been 4 years and 11 months now. Hello, it was true what you said to me. That life in the city is unbelievable. Had to struggle just to get by every day, and I could barely find my way. Mo mọ̀ pé mo lè ṣìnà. Mo rí pé ayé lè ṣòro. Forgive me, Father, but I gotta take a chance. Oh, I'm already gone, so just pray for me. Forgive me, Father, but I gotta take a chance. Oh, I'm already gone, so just pray for me.